Good to have you. We're going to continue this thought on Charis Kairos, which is loosely interpreted the time of grace or the age of grace. Most of you have heard of Steve Jobs, the founder of the Apple empire. He was a guy who was kind of a mixed bag of admiration and revulsion. People either loved him or hated him. Without a doubt, Steve's earthly success level was so high that that writers and people that tried to comment on it would find it was hard to find comparisons for someone who had his kind of influence. They'd use names like Thomas Edison and Henry Ford. He was a visionary genius who revolutionized 6 different industries. He dropped out of college to start this company called Apple, and then he was, at age 30, he was very publicly fired from it. But his resilience was pretty amazing. His legacy includes the Mac computers and the whole Apple empire, Pixar Studios, iTunes, the iPod when that came out, the iPhone, and then finally the iPad. He just changed the way that we think about computers and phones and music and movies and retail stores. He made technology cool. Somehow it turned the corner and became cool. The New Yorker magazine did a tribute to him when he died, and it shows him at the pearly gate standing in front of St. Peter, and St. Peter's checking out the book of life, but instead it's been upgraded to the iPad of life up in heaven. Now, the week that he died, there was a quote in the newspaper that said, "Not long ago we had Steve Jobs, Johnny Cash, and Bob Hope. Now there's no Jobs, no Cash, and no Hope." He was the inventor or co-inventor. His name was on 340 patents. It's amazing. He was incredibly successful. And then he died of pancreatic cancer at age 56. 56, think about that. It's a young pup. Anybody know how much he left behind? How much money he left behind? All of it. All of it. I saw a reference to him this week, and it got me thinking about it. How successful is successful enough? Think about that. How successful is successful enough? I thought it'd be interesting to see how we're doing. I mean, nobody knows really for sure, but let's just say that Steve Jobs is the standard of success for a life. How are we doing here? How many have not launched a legendary organization that passed Mobile Exxon and became one of the most powerful companies in the world? Not done that? Okay. How many of you not revolutionized 6 different industries? How many of you are not worth more than $7 billion? Anybody here? Okay. How many were not named Fortune magazine's CEO of the decade? Anybody else? Not? Yeah, me neither. If you just look around, you see in the room, we're a bunch of losers. We want to be successful. We like the idea of being, the brightest or the best, and that's why people drive it so hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. A dark secret of the brightest and the best is that they live under a pressure that is killing them. Ambition can grind the life out of the very brightest life. Today, we have middle school students who live so relentlessly under the pressure of performance that they're going into therapy at 13 years old. So how much success is enough? There was another sports and business icon by the name of Tiger Woods. Some of you have probably heard of him. If ever a kid was programmed to win, it was Tiger Woods. His dad was the primary programmer of Tiger's mind, but it was actually his mom who was the catalyst for his killer instinct. She was the one that taught him to be aloof and distant and standoffish with all other players when he was playing tournaments. And she would put it this way, she'd say, in just a little while, you'll be stepping on their necks. Why would you become friends with them? Now, Tiger is winding down his legendary career. And the truth is, there's a bushel of PGA Tour players with incredible talent, but they had one common big, huge problem. They went up against Tiger in his prime. And the intimidation that he gave off was crippling for some really, really, really good players. They melted down while Tiger seized the moment. All in all, Tiger seized the moment 81 times in his career. 81 victories, when a lot of guys' long careers are defined by one victory. A lot of guys play their whole career and never get a victory. Now, among those were 14 major wins, second only to Jack Nicklaus, who was also world class. But in the final analysis, Tiger Woods earned $1.8 billion as a result of his constant winning. So How much winning is winning enough? Let's see how many winners we have here. Just for the sake of argument, let's just say the Tiger is setting the bar for winning. How many of you have not made 1.8 billion? We kind of went over that a minute ago. How many are not in some kind of hall of fame in your life? How many have not had an international impact upon a sport that is not known with minorities, but he had a worldwide impact upon minorities in sport? So how much winning is enough? Thought a bit further. How attractive is attractive enough? You're going to see a picture of Ryan Gosling up here. Oh, big deal. Big deal. Wait till he turns gray-haired and gains 50 pounds. But anyway, if you're young and you are very good-looking, people will tell you, oh, man, you look really, really good. But if you live long enough, you hit a certain stage in life, and people will add a little phrase to that. Just 3 words, think of what it is. People will say, you look good for your age. In other words, it's not that you look good in absolute terms. No, not at all. You look good for your age. Wrinkles and flab and age spots are causing you to wither at a slower pace than some of your peers. So, you look good by comparison with other old, flabby people. You look good for your age. So, how attractive is attractive enough? How many here were not named Sexiest Man or Women of the Year by People magazine? Anybody? It's like we're all in the same boat. Now, I say all this because we're in this series, Charis Kairos. We're kind of putting stakes in the ground about what's really true. And one thing that we have to know is that we are not in God's good favor because we are shockingly successful or accomplished or winning or attractive. No, we are saved and forgiven and accepted and loved and declared to be right and in a relationship with God by grace alone. Grace is all over the Bible. And Paul wrote to the church in the city of Ephesus some words that would become stake in the ground words for the church for a very, very, very long time. We read them last week. It comes from Ephesians 2:9, which says, "For it is by grace you have been saved through faith. This not from yourselves. It's the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." No one can boast. Now, we live in kind of a boasty world, Paul tells us. But he says that salvation is not boast-worthy. And it's important for all of us to be really clear on this grace alone thing. It is God's grace alone. Now, the old definition of grace is one that we call it unmerited favor. And it's that word unmerited that's really, really good, but it kind of sticks in our craw a little bit. The ancient Greeks would use that word to describe somebody who was weak or needy or dependent upon others. Then a strong person might come along and help for no particular reason, nothing that the weak one had done at all. That's grace. Grace is God's choice to love and forgive and accept and to help us when we have done nothing to deserve it or to earn it. Grace recognizes that we are flawed at the very core. It's not that we just got dealt an unfair hand in life, and that's why we struggle. It's why we struggle with bitterness or doubt or greed or lust or anger, whatever it may be. At the very core, it is not somebody else's fault. I'm fallen and imperfect, and this goes all the way back to the beginning. It's my nature. Nobody needed to teach me how to be selfish or rebellious. That comes pretty naturally to us. I met a guy who was talking about his daughter, Shauna, and she was a real strong-willed kid. Ever been around a strong-willed child? When she was 4 years old, one of the problems they've had is that she would get on her little tricycle and ride it where she was not supposed to go. Her mom got so frustrated one time, she comes out in the yard and says, "All right, Shauna, look, here's the deal. Here is our sidewalk right here. You could ride your bike in between the tree and the driveway, but you can't go beyond that. If you go beyond that, I'm going to spank you. I'm going to go back in the house, but you see that big picture window? I'm going to be watching you. And if you ride beyond where you're supposed to ride, I'm going to come out, and there will be spanking." Well, Shauna was not intimidated by this at all. 4 years old, she backs up to her mom, sticks her hip out, points to it, says, "We better spank me now because I got places to go." That's kind of the human condition right there. At the very heart of it is that the human will has gotten off track. We've turned our hearts from God. I have, and you have. So the question is, that's not even under debate, really, but the question is, where do we go from here? Where do we go from there? Will I try to behave my way into good graces with God, Or will we humble ourselves and receive what Jesus died to give us? Now, the alternative to grace is talked about in the Bible as works righteousness. Works righteousness. That is I'm going to pull up my own bootstraps thing. I'm going to be good enough. I try really, really hard to stay out of sin and keep really good boundaries and be really, really disciplined. Well, then certainly God will honor that, right? That impresses God, right? I think grace would just say, stop, please just stop. You cannot be good enough. You cannot stay clean enough. You can't be committed enough. You can't deny yourself enough. That's a treadmill that never shuts off. And when you fall, because you will, the crash will be painful. And God provides a better way. So here's one thing that we really need to be reminded of regularly, especially those of us who tend to gravitate away from grace and toward defining our relationship with God according to our behavior. If you want to make sure that you get credit for your goodness, if you want to mix law and grace, mix religion and Christianity, then Paul lowers the boom in Galatians chapter 3 with these words. He says, those who depend on the law to make them right with God are under his curse, for the scriptures say, cursed is everyone who does not obey all the commands that are written in God's book of the law. Here's what he's saying. If you'd rather try to please God and gain his favor by obeying the rules of religion, you can do that, but you've got to do it on his terms, not yours. It's his law after all. So if you opt for rule keeping to try to please God, then you've got to keep them all of them. You got to ace his test every day for the rest of your life. You got to obey 100% of the law 100% of the time. You can't pick and choose the commands that work for you and then ignore the ones that don't. No, all of them, all the time. No bad days. No stumbles at all. You drop the ball one time, game over. You put one thing ahead of God one time, game over. One impure thought, game over. 100% of the law, 100% of the time. Do you really want that? Because when you take the time to really look thoroughly at the law and the commandments, it becomes pretty obvious to me that I can't do that. The 10 Commandments are just a portion of the law, and I've blown those. Seems like I can't get 100% for a day, much less for a lifetime. So if you're sharp, you might come up with a good question about this. I mean, if we can't keep the law and the commandments, why did they exist in the first place? Here's what Paul says in verse 19 of Galatians 3. What then was the purpose of the law? Which is a fair question. After all, if everybody blows it, why is it even there? Paul goes right into the answer in the verses that follow. He says, the law was given alongside the promise to show people their sins, but the law was designed to last only until the coming of the child who was promised. Is there a conflict then between God's law and God's promises? Absolutely not. If the law could give us new life, we could be made right with God by obeying it. But the scriptures declare that we are all, great word here, prisoners of sin. He's saying that the law showed us two things. That it shows us what sin is, and it shows us that we are all guilty of it. Let me just explain something that's kind of important here. God doesn't point out sin in order to have something to hold against us. Because if we had the wisdom of God, we would see that sin is not just an offense against him, but sin is something that harms the creation that he loves so much, namely you and me. Sin hurts you. Sin hurts others. Sin complicates your life. God wants to free you from that, spare you from that, and he's provided a way to do it. The law was a step in the process of getting us there. So the law showed us two things. It showed us what sin was, and then it showed us that we were all guilty of it. That's not good news. That's not even news. But in verse 24, Paul delivers the good news here. He says, the law was our guardian until Christ came. It protected us until we could be made right with God through faith. And now that the way of faith has come, we no longer need the law as our guardian. The purpose of the law, not according to me, but according to God's own word, was to lead us to Christ. Because when you look at the law, you have to say, I can't do this. No matter how hard I try, I keep failing. I can't do it on my own. And that is when God steps in and says, of course you can't. You need me, not rules. You need me, not rules. The rules show you that the standard is just too high to keep on your own. You can't, and Bob can't, Sally can't, and Mother Teresa couldn't. The righteousness bar is unreachable and it is immovable. The law can't get you there, but there is another way. And it's me, God says. Me, come to me and receive grace and mercy in your time of need. I will give it, God says. Saying, that's why I sent Jesus. He kept the law perfectly. He satisfied the requirements of the law perfectly for you. If you could be justified by the law or by religion, by keeping the rules, then Jesus died for nothing. But he didn't die for nothing. He's your only hope. So what's the purpose of the law? To bring us, to lead us to Jesus. God's grace and acceptance is truly amazing, but he won't force you to receive it. He offers it to you. He offers himself to you. The commandments, the rules, the law was for a purpose. It was to show you your need and then point you to the loving grace and forgiveness of Jesus, not to empower you to a life of rule keeping. Author John Eldredge put it this way. He said, teach a man a rule and you help him solve a problem. Teach a man to walk with God and you help him solve the rest of his life. That takes faith. And we need to be willing to let go of the behavior and reward sort of cycle. Because for many, the law makes sense. It's easy to understand. It seems fair. It seems manageable. And most importantly, it feels like it keeps you in control. And it makes you think that you can see how you're doing in comparison to everybody else, as if that mattered one bit. But grace defies logic and fairness, turns everything upside down. And it's unsettling because we've been raised to believe that performance brings reward and approval. So when we hear these words, of course you don't deserve it, but I'm going to give it to you anyway, our cynical warning bells go up. We go, whoa, 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 wait a minute here. Wait a minute. I didn't fall for that scam with the Ethiopian millionaire in exile, and I'm not going to fall for this one either. What's the catch? What's the catch? When you really face grace and understand it for the first time, it is most definitely unsettling. It is. A writer by the name of Robert Capon, who brilliantly lays out this honest prayer for someone that is resisting grace. I love these words. He said, Lord, please restore to us the comfort of merit and demerit. Show us that there's at least something we can do. Tell us at the end of the day there'll be at least one redeeming card of our very own. Lord, if it's not too much to ask, send us to bed with a few shreds of self-respect upon which we can congratulate ourselves, because we love to do that. But whatever you do, please do not preach grace. Give us something to do, anything, but spare us the indignity of this indiscriminate acceptance. We buck and we resist and we fight grace at first, but if we can just let go and trust, then the good news of Jesus just keeps getting better and better and better. His grace is sufficient for you and for me, not just for salvation, but for life. Religion and behavior modification cannot get you anywhere that you really want to be, because that leads to striving and self-focus and disappointment and then exhaustion, and then finally frustration and then depression. Let that go. Let that go. Just trust and follow Jesus and learn to live in love. And whenever you get the chance, share that good news. Share the good news that Jesus help people to recognize that Jesus did it all. We don't have to do it all. Just enjoy him forever. I don't know if you hear that much. Just enjoy him forever. Love him forever. Be grateful to him forever. Let me just leave you with one final word directly from Jesus in Matthew chapter 11. We've read these words before. Let them sink in. Are you tired, worn out, says Jesus, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. This is how Jesus wants you to walk with him. Not striving and under stress about performance, but loving him more every day, appreciating him more every day, walking in his grace and thanking him every day. This is what God wants.